We've had a lot of people interested in the presentation today, and we just want to give a few minutes so everybody can get in. And just a quick note that we this will also be recorded and sent out to everybody that registered. And we are also live streaming this on our YouTube channel. And every registrant should have received a link via email. So if there's any issues with Zoom, you can also uh, view the webinar there. I'm going to go ahead and get us started because I know there's a lot of information to share and folks have a lot of questions. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here and for taking time out of your busy schedules during this challenging time. My name is Beth Malik. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Associate Director of the Law Project of the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless. And I'm here with my colleagues, Sam and Claire, who are helping out as well with the technical end of the presentation. But most of the information that you will receive today will come from Gwen Mayshon. Am I saying that? I apologize. I should have asked you. And Gwen is the Associate Director of the Public Benefits Unit at Legal Aid Chicago. And she will be talking today about some of the changes and challenges facing with the SNAP program, with a focus on individuals experiencing homelessness or housing instability. So just for some housekeeping purposes, I will be monitoring the Q&A. So please, during the presentation, please feel free to throw questions in. We're not going to be able to get to questions until the very end. And there is a possibility that we won't get to every question, but we're going to do the very best that we can to answer as many questions as possible. And I know we did leave some questions or time at the end to get to folks' questions. So, and if I can't answer them in the chat directly during the presentation, we're not going to stop, and we'll get to questions at the end. But if I can answer it in the chat, I will do so. And with that, I will turn it over to Gwen. So thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Beth. Thanks everybody for joining today. I've got a lot of information, and so I expect there will be questions. So again, we'll try to get to those as soon as we can. I'm Gwen Michon. I'm with Legal Aid Chicago. Here's a little bit about who we are in case you're not familiar. We're a large nonprofit law firm that provides civil legal aid in a variety of areas. I don't practice any of these except for public benefits, which I have been practicing for about 15 years now. This is what I'm hoping to take away from today and the order in which we're going to go over it. So my goal is that you'll help, I'm going to help you all get a better understanding of what's going on. We're facing a dire and complicated situation for SNAP recipients right now. It's pretty scary, particularly with the threat of SNAP benefits stopping the end of this week. I'm going to give you the best up-to-date information that I have. I do want to note that the situation is rapidly changing. When I first agreed to do this training, I said, sure, I already have a training put together. And then when I was looking it over in preparation for today, I realized that a lot of the information on there had already been out of date, even though it was just 3 weeks ago. And so just know that things are changing. And we have a site that I'll give you at the end. I'll give you a few sites along the way, actually, where you can hopefully get some more up-to-date information as things unfold. And then I'm going to focus on several steps that SNAP recipients can take, with particular focus, as Beth mentioned, on helping folks who are homeless. So this is the order that I'm going to go over things. So one, because I know this is on people's minds, is what's going on with the threat of SNAP pausing on November 1st. Then we're going to talk about some changes that are happening to SNAP, and perhaps not in an order that you were expecting. But one, there's been a change to how DHS is what they're requiring for proving shelter costs in applications and redeterminations. There's some changes to the certification periods, which I'm expecting will have an adverse impact on people who are homeless, more than on some other folks. And so I just want to highlight that and give you some tips for navigating those. I'm going to touch on immigrant eligibility changes, in case you are working with any folks who fit into those populations, and some next steps that some folks will be able to qualify can take to maintain SNAP eligibility. Um, and then the other big topic is the work requirements that are coming back in Illinois. All right, so with that, I'm just going to move on. All right. So, as I think most folks have probably heard, possibly heard, um, DHS and USDA, which is the federal agency that oversees the food stamps program, have announced that SNAP will not be issued to SNAP beneficiaries starting November 1st. This is all related to the shutdown, the federal shutdown. And so and the political negotiations that are happening as relates to the shutdown. So, the announcement as of right now is that if the shutdown does not end, then SNAP will stop and that it will not come back until if and when the shutdown ends. Did I say that right? If the shutdown does not end, it will not be issued until the shutdown does end. That is the position of USDA at the moment. This is a USDA decision. Just as a side note, this is not coming from the state. SNAP is a joint federal state program. And so, because the benefits are being issued from the money for the benefits right now is coming all from the federal government. And so, if the federal government decides not to issue the benefits to the state, then the state cannot distribute them to SNAP beneficiaries. There was a lawsuit filed yesterday, and Illinois, as a state, is a party to that lawsuit. The hearing on that lawsuit is tomorrow, and I know that there is a request that the judge issue a temporary restraining order, which is basically an order saying that USDA cannot stop the issuance of benefits until they figure out the rest of the case. So that's the request that the states are making. I don't know what the judge is going to say. I can't predict the future of this, but so we're watching this very, very closely. In the meantime, here are just some things that I recommend that folks can do. Um, DHS is sending out text alerts to SNAP beneficiaries to let them know what's going on. They do not plan to send any notices. There will not be paper notices sent, but they will issue SNAP alerts or text alerts. So if anyone is not receiving those, they can sign up for them. There's two ways to sign up. You can sign up on Manage My Case. It's a little bit complicated getting to the section where you sign up for SNAP alerts. But if you're familiar with that system, when you go into Manage My Case, there's these tabs at the top. Sorry, I should have included an image. One of those tabs says Account Management, and in the middle of that page, there's a link that says Manage My Communication Preferences. If you click on that, it takes you to a page where you can update your contact information and sign up for text and email alerts. Sorry that the images are not actually there. If someone does not have access to Manage My Case, either because they can't get through the email verifications or they don't have computer access or they can't verify their accounts, like there's a number of reasons that people don't have access. They can also sign up. We've been told, and I haven't tested this, but DHS told us that people can sign up for the text alerts by calling the DHS helpline. So that number's right here. It's 866-324-5553. Um, Another opportunity to get updates is by checking on this website the DHS has set up. It's snapfederalimpact.illinois.gov. Um, in the event that SNAP benefits are not issued, um, then I just included the site here for food banks. It's just going to be really hard. The food banks they're already been taking a really big hit because of other things. There were other cuts that were already made that were impairing their ability to get food in. I know that they're all working really hard to make sure that they're stocked up so that there's enough food to go around. But we know that this is going to be a really, really tough time for a lot of people if this SNAP stops. Okay. So I'm going to move on to just what's changing. So to be clear, oops, sorry, just clicked on the wrong thing. There's two things that are happening right now. The SNAP stopping has to do with the shutdown. The rest of what I'm going to talk about now is related to the budget reconciliation bill, sometimes referred to as HR 1 or OBA. That was a bill that the our federal Congress signed into law and that our president signed. The Congress passed the bill and the president signed into law on July 4th. It made a number of changes to the SNAP program as well as the Medicaid program. The Medicaid program changes are not set to take effect yet. And so that's why we're so focused on SNAP right at the moment. I'm not going to go through all of the changes. Um, but I will talk about there's an expansion of work requirements for the SNAP program. There's a restriction on time limit and work requirement waivers. So Illinois is currently under a waiver, which means that the work requirement rules have not applied here, and they have not applied in Illinois for a number of years. And so they'll be going into effect for the first time for most SNAP recipients. There's a restriction on immigrant eligibility. So if there's a little asterisk here, I'm going to talk about those later in some detail. Um, the legislation also changed benefit calculations. I'll touch on this a little bit. It's going to it's going to impact families that are receiving LAHEAP, which is a program that helps pay for utilities. Um, there are also changes to the 50 food plan. There's some cost shifting between how much the state has to pay for the SNAP program. I'm not going to really talk about those. Um, and there's also this is creating some additional changes in our state. The state is going to have to pay a higher amount of the costs. So they've never had to pay, the state's never had to pay for the actual benefits that people receive on their link cards in the past. So now the state is going to have to pay for that, and the amount that they have to pay for it is related to what's called error rates. Um, and so the state has had to make some changes to some policies to bring down the error rates in hopes that that will limit the amount that the state is going to have to pay out for the SNAP program so that the federal government will continue pitching in the money that it's been pitching in the past. Um, Governor Pritzker issued a statement saying that their office believes this will impact approximately 360,000 Illinoisans. And will greatly increase the SNAP program, the cost of the SNAP program. Um, Many of these changes are going to disproportionately affect people who are homeless. So I'm going to start with sort of like the faster ones. So proving shelter costs. In for many years, DHS has okay, where to start? So shelter costs play into a SNAP case because it impacts the amount of monthly SNAPs a family receives. So once you determine that a family is income eligible for the SNAP program, there are all these different factors and they're listed here. This is actually the calculator that's on DHS's website. I included the link here. I find this should be pretty handy. It's not 100% accurate, but it's like it can give a good estimate for a lot of folks. Um, and it can you can see here there's like I don't know if I have a laser pointer. I like having a laser pointer. I do. So this section here has income. Assets actually don't count for anything in Illinois, but you have to report them. So to calculate SNAP eligibility, they look at income. To look at the monthly benefit amount, they look at the income and they also look at various expenses. And one of those expenses is shelter. So past and in the past, DHS has just asked people how much do they spend on shelter, and that will dictate the amount of the shelter deduction they receive. That is changing. So now people have to verify their shelter expenses, which means they're going to have to provide proof. I provide a more detailed kind of breakdown of how that works here. Um, it's a little bit complicated. I'm going to send the slides to Chicago Coalition for the Homeless folks so they can distribute this and make it available in case it's helpful. Um, but I'm going to point out a couple things. So shelter costs are that have to be verified are the ones in this top section. Rent, mortgage, renter's insurance, property tax, like anything that people are spending to have a place to live. Utilities do not have to be verified. They just have to be reported. And this is where the LAHEAP business is coming in. And so just to explain what this means to you. Um, so one thing that the legislation changed was that in the past, if someone received LAHEAP, they would automatically qualify for this large utility standard. The larger the standard you get, the more SNAP you can be eligible for in your monthly benefits. Um, because of changes from HR 1, the only people who continue to qualify for that are people who are qualified members. There's a qualified member is generally someone who's over 60 or receiving some sort of federal disability benefit. And then everything else is going to be, they're going to, if you're not one of those people, then having the heap won't matter. Um, okay. The point that I'm actually trying to get to for this training is actually on the next slide. So most families are going to have to prove the shelter cost. This can be particularly challenging for folks who are homeless, who have some sort of shelter expense, because it's either hard to keep all the receipts from, let's say if someone's staying to pay at a shelter or staying to pay at a hotel occasionally, it's hard to hold all those receipts. Um, some families, they might be doubled up for short periods of time with families who are unwilling to provide evidence that that person is staying at their house because maybe they're not supposed to be having house guests overnight. Like there's all sorts of reasons why it can be hard for someone who's homeless to like provide third-party evidence. Um, there is a rule. This has been an existing rule in it's a federal law and it's been in DHS policy that if someone is homeless, they should qualify for this homeless shelter deduction. So under DHS rules, someone qualifies for the homeless shelter deduction if they fit into one of these categories. It's kind of, traditional unhoused or literally homeless under HUD rules, or if they're staying at someone's place for a temporary time, so less than 90 days. In these situations, they do not have to provide any verification of the housing expense, and then they automatically get this $190 homeless shelter deduction rather than getting the excess shelter deduction. That's a little in the weeds, but I did want to like point this out. If you have any clients who are homeless, or if you're homeless and you're having a hard time proving your shelter, they should not be asking for any verifications. They should just be able to give you this. Um, if they are asking you for verifications, they might be trying to find out if your excess shelter deduction would be higher than this, because if it's higher, you get whichever one's more beneficial for you. Or it could be that the worker doesn't know what the homeless shelter deduction is. We have seen that in several cases. If that's the case, you can point them to this thing down here. And I forgot to point these out earlier. In these slides, I've tried to put citations to information to provide you more information about what it is I have on the slide. So PM is the policy manual. This is a document that's used by the Department of Human Services. Workers are used to looking at these at DHS. And so sometimes I find it helpful if I want to make sure they're applying a rule that's going to be beneficial to my client. I'll just put these citations right on the application. And there's a note section at the bottom of the application. And like, so I can say, hey, please make sure you look at this part of the policy manual. My client should qualify for the homeless shelter deduction, something like that. Okay. Um, Another change is that certification periods are changing. I'm going to try to speed up here. I'm worried about time. Um, in the past, DHS has approved SNAP benefits for periods of 12 months for most people. That is reducing to 6 months. Unless someone qualifies for this EDSRP. The acronym doesn't matter. Um, so folks who are where the everyone in the household is elderly, disabled, and has no countable elderly or disabled and has no countable earned income, they should be getting 24-month periods. And by disabled here, sorry, disabled is going to mean different things in different places of this presentation, because that's how SNAP-RAL works. So disabled here means that you're actually getting some sort of federal disability benefit, usually Social Security, or SSI. Um, if someone qualifies for this, they should be getting a 24-month certification period. Everyone else is going to 6. That means they're going to have more interaction with the department to keep benefits ongoing. So someone applies, let's say this month, um, they're going to have to go through this process, right? So they file their application, then they have to do an interview. Then they have to verify eligibility, so submitting whatever documents DHS needs to approve their case, to prove that they qualify and to prove how much they qualify for. And then DHS issues a notice of decision. Um, then 6 months later, they're gonna have to do it again. So, and then there's a weird thing that happens after that where for the next 6 months period, they're gonna do an application, verification, notice of decision, but they won't have to do the interview. They should only have to do the interview every 12 months. Um, so I'm really worried about this for folks who are homeless because they're more it's harder to make sure you're getting the notices. It's harder to attend the interviews. And so just a few tips that we've come up with. Um, sorry, my daughter was calling me. Um, so to avoid terminations based on missed interviews. One, you can sign up for that same text alert system that I mentioned earlier, either through Manage My Case or by calling the DHS helpline. They should send texts when redeterminations are coming up. You could set up a calendaring reminder system. That might help some folks, maybe less helpful for others. Make sure the DHS has the correct address for you to make sure so that you're getting the notices that they're sending. And then file all the redeterminations if you can on Manage My Case or do some other method for showing that it was filed. This part is actually vital. Um, Unlike many other actions by the Department of Human Services, um, if DHS loses your redetermination, it's going to be really hard for you to fight um, to say the DHS did something wrong if you don't have proof that you submitted it. Because the termination that happens is not appealable. If someone does not file a redetermination on time, you can't appeal that decision unless you actually did file your redetermination application. And so you really need to have proof that you filed it. The only notice that someone will get about the redetermination before their benefits are cut off is that redetermination application. They don't get another notice saying that their benefits are going to stop. And so if you submit it, you think you've submitted it and they never get it, you're not going to get a notice saying that they didn't get it. Your benefits are just going to stop. A few tips on getting through the interview process. Um, this top one is the one that I use with most of my clients. So we file the application or redetermination. I wait 15 minutes. We call the helpline, or I send them to the local DHS office to complete the interview. You don't have to wait for them to call you. I find for a lot of folks it's easier, especially if you're hard to get a hold of because you don't have steady phone access. It's easier to just like go in when you can and ask them to do the interview. Um, Again, make sure DHS has proper phone number and address for you. If you miss the interview, you can still try to get them to do the interview by calling or going to the office. Um, as long as they haven't issued a denial, usually that's successful based on our experience. If they do issue a denial because you've missed an interview, that is appealable under this provision of the policy manual. So if you get a notice saying that your application or redetermination was denied because of missed interview, you can try to appeal that and cite to this provision. We do those regularly. Okay. Immigration work rules are changing. So next topic. Sorry, I'm kind of like jumping from thing to thing. Um, But okay, immigration work rules are changing. This again has to do with that federal legislation that was passed over the summer. The timeline for this is what has been ironed out recently. So, starting on November 2nd, these new rules are going to apply for people who are applying for benefits. Anyone who is currently receiving SNAP but is now ineligible under the legislation, they're going to lose eligibility starting on December 1st. So DHS said they're going to start sending notices sometime in November. The groups that are losing eligibility are these ones in bold here. So it's people who are lawfully present in the United States, who have immigration status through VAWA, who are refugees, asylees, or T visa holders. Those are trafficking survivors. They will all lose SNAP eligibility in a few weeks. Um, DHS has told us that some of these individuals who are losing eligibility because of immigration status should be eligible for some state-funded food assistance called the VTTC program. That's Victims of Trafficking, Torture, and Other Serious Crimes. They haven't issued any policies on this yet, so we're still monitoring it. And we don't know what the timeline is of when that will be available. But it should eventually be available to refugees and asylees and to T visa holders. Um, Want to note though that VTTC, so it's a state-funded program and eligibility or the availability of those benefits is based on how much funding is available in the state budget. They've allocated a certain amount of money for the VTTC program. Once that money is gone, then they will stop approving applications. And we do not expect them to have enough VTTC funds to last through the end of the fiscal year. We don't know how long it's going to last yet. All right. So work requirements. This is a longer section. All right. This is the one that a lot of folks I think have been hearing about. And um, it's going to have a lot of it has going to have a big impact that'll be really painful for a lot of families. Um, so first, there are two different sets of work rules for SNAP, and I just want to confirm that because some notices went out earlier this year that got people very confused. Um, so there's work provisions and there's work requirements. The work provisions help are used to determine if someone is eligible for SNAP. And the requirements are here. It applies to anyone between the ages of 16 and 59 who are able to work. There are exceptions to it. We're not going to worry about those right now. Um, the requirements include registering for work, participating in SNAP employment and training if they want to. This is an optional program. It's not required. Um, if they're offered a job that's suitable, they have to take it. And if they quit a job that they have to have a good reason for doing so. Um, this registering for work thing really freaks people out earlier this year. Um, in Illinois, you're registered for work when they send you a notice. Just there's a certain notice that they send that discusses this program. That is the registration for work. And so that's all. That's not actually, this is actually done by DHS. It's not done by the person receiving the benefits. Okay, we're going to discuss exemptions in a minute because they're going to align with the other part. Okay, this is the part that has changed. Work requirements. So the work provisions are you eligible? The work requirements say how long can you get SNAP within a 36-month like set calendar period. So under general federal SNAP rules, they call it able-bodied adults without dependents. That term doesn't even make sense anymore based on the changes that were made this summer. But we'll go ahead and use that. The acronym is ABODs. That ABODs are limited to only receiving SNAP for 3 months in any 36-month period. After they've used that 3 months, the only way that they can receive benefits again is if they are meeting the work requirement for at least a month or if they're exempt. So to meet the work requirement, someone has to work paid or unpaid work for an average of 80 hours or sorry, 20 hours per week or 80 hours per month. Um, and or do some combination of other activities that gets them to that time amount. So it could be volunteering, it could be participating in SNAP employment and training, or doing community service. So we've had a waiver of these rules in Illinois for as long as most people can remember. That waiver was scheduled to the waiver would be approved for like 6 month periods at a time. The current waiver was approved only through January 31st of 2026. Um, but USDA has told the state that our waiver is now ending on November 2nd. So now these rules are in effect. In addition, the federal legislation expanded who is subjected to the work requirements. I'm not going to go through what all the changes are. I'm just going to tell you who is subjected to them and who's not. Um, so the current 3-year period that we're in actually ends in December 31st of 2026. So the counting is going to start on December 1st. So if someone is receiving SNAP and they are not exempt and they are not complying or they're not able to show that they're complying, they'll get SNAP for December, January, and February, and then they will be terminated from SNAP. And unless they can meet the requirements to show that they are either have been that they've either started working and have worked for at least 30 days or that they are exempt, they are not going to be eligible for SNAP again until January 1st of 2027. Um, our focus right now has been trying to help people who are exempt show that they're exempt and get that information into the department. There are a lot of administrative burdens involved with compliance with the work requirements, having to prove that you're complying with the work requirements. So anyone who qualifies for an exemption, we are encouraging them to go ahead and apply for that, so they don't have to worry about those administrative burdens. There are a number of groups who are exempt from the work requirements, and I've broken them up in 2 slides for a reason. So, and apologies if you can hear my dog barking. So part one, who is exempt? Oops, I have this backwards. Okay, so sorry. So you're exempt if you're under 18 or if you're over 65. You are not subjected to the work requirements. You're also not subjected if you're living in a household with a child under 14. If you are receiving SSI or SSD, I'm so sorry. I'll fix these before I send them in. If you are currently subject to TANF work requirements, and you're complying with those, you're exempt. Or if you're receiving, sorry, I forgot this too. If you're receiving unemployment benefits, that should go on this part, you are exempt. Or if you're in the process of applying for unemployment benefits. These are the kind of things that DHS knows or probably knows about you. Maybe not if you're applying for unemployment. If you're getting unemployment, DHS should know that. If you're getting Social Security, DHS should know that. They share information with other agencies where they're able to gather information about SNAP recipients and some of these things you might be putting in your application, like how old you are. So if you meet an exception where DHS can tell that you're already exempt, you should already be in that exemption on November 2nd when they remove the waiver from the system. And so hopefully you don't have to do anything. They should be sending new notices, letting you know if you are qualifying for an exemption and which ones they are. These groups of people are also exempt, but it is unlikely that DHS knows it. So it's kind of a long list. Slightly worried about time. I guess I'm not too worried. Let's go through it. So this is the one that we're putting a lot of energy into, people who are unfit for work because of physical, mental, or medical conditions. This is a broad amount of people. Unfit for work is a much lower bar than disability. So to qualify as disabled, those other programs I mentioned where you have to be disabled, you have to have a condition or combinations of conditions that prevent you from working for at least 12 months and that prevent you from working any jobs. Unfit for work can include temporary conditions, And they don't have to be so severe that you can't do any work. It's a little squishy. The definition is not as well fleshed out as it is for Social Security, but we do know that it's a lower bar than Social Security. It includes people who are applying for Social Security, SSI, or Social Security disability. Um, if someone is an Alaskan Native American Indian, American Urban Indian, or California Indian, they are exempt. If you're caring for an incapacitated or disabled person, or if you're caring for a child under 6 who's outside of your home, these are things that DHS wouldn't know, but it would exempt you from the work requirements. If you are enrolled in school or training program at least half time, this one's a little bit confusing. You're exempt from the work requirements, but there are special rules in SNAP that I'm not going to go through right now because we don't have time. I put the policy right there, and if you can email me if you have specific questions. Um, but if you're engaged in those programs, then you're exempt from these work requirements, but you are subjected to some other requirements. The general rule is that someone who is engaged in post-secondary school at least half time is ineligible for SNAP unless they're complying with something else. So it's like caring for a small child or working a number of hours. So there might be another work requirement that creeps in because you're in school. If someone is enrolled in a drug or alcohol treatment program other than AA or NA, they are exempt. Oh, here I have the receiving or applied for unemployment benefits. If you are pregnant, if you are chronically homeless, um, let me get back to that in a second. Or if you're working or earning at least $935 a month, that's gross. So that's before taxes and other fees come out of your check. These groups are exempt. Um, Chronically homeless. Um, right now, DHS is saying that the definition of chronically homeless is the same as HUD's definition. So this is a pretty high bar. Um, my understanding is that DHS is still waiting for some guidance from USDA about how some of these provisions work. So that might change. But just when you're looking at chronically homeless here, it is the same definition as HUD, which I don't have handy with me, but I wanted to tag that because I know homeless advocates are likely to be wondering if that's the same, and it is. Um, okay, so if you're fitting in one of these categories, you have to tell DHS. How do you tell DHS? Oh, I'll get to that second. Okay, so here are some things that you can do. I think one of the biggest bars, because these exemption groups, it's not like there's like an overwhelming theme that makes it easy for someone to like intuitively know that they're going to qualify for an exception. So DHS has set up this screening tool on their website that's pretty good and easy to navigate. You don't have to log into your Manage My Case account. It's just on the front page of ABE, which is abe.illinois.gov. So if you click on there, there's a tool that'll take you through where it will ask you about these various exemptions. If you click yes to any of them, it will tell you what steps DHS thinks you need to take. Um, and then if you click no to all of them, it's going to say that you're probably subject to the work requirements. I would say like don't give up. Don't the screening tool is not designed to precisely indicate whether someone is because it's so much of this is like an individualized assessment, especially as to whether someone is unfit for work. And so I would say don't, you can always try to get an exception anyway. This is the form that DHS is currently using for people to request exceptions. So what we are recommending folks do is to get copies of this form, um, and then fill them out and submit them to DHS if you think you qualify for an exception. So all those reasons that I listed earlier are listed on this form. I wanted to tag this last one because it almost looks like they just like ran out of space for boxes. But there's two exceptions in this last category. One is I'm a migrant or seasonal farm worker, and then there's some more qualifications, blah, 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 blah. Or I'm earning wages that are at least 217.50 per week before taxes and other deductions. That's this one right here, the $935 a month. I think that that's what their intention is because they don't have that exception anywhere else, and that is a separate exception. I'm not sure. It's confusing. You could also just say on there, I am earning $935 a month and don't click anything. Um, but you just write your name. The form is pretty easy. On the top part, there's some identifying information about the DHS case. Most of that information you can find on the DHS notices. If you have a copy of a notice of decision, it's on the top right. You write your name, you say which one of these categories you fit into, you sign it, and then submit it to DHS. I am always going to recommend that you submit things in a way that there is a paper trail. And so you can upload it to manage my case. There's an upload document section. You can try to fax it to DHS or you can bring it to the office and submit in person. If someone is not chronically homeless, but they are homeless and engaged in homeless services, or if they're engaged in domestic violence services, there is another route for getting to be found exempt from the work requirements. And this is this form 2340. And I can send links or copies of the forms to out if people need them. I can send them to CCH to send out. Um, on this form, you can write down, you'd fill out this part, say I participate in a homeless services program or in a domestic violence program. You sign it and date it, but then you also need to have a service provider complete another section, which I'll show you in a second. And then once that's all completed, submit it to manage my case, fax it to DHS, like the same process. This is what the provider section looks like. So you're marking off that the person is engaged in your services and can't work um, or participate in a training program because of their involvement with your services. The form currently says this person has experienced chronic homelessness. DHS told us that anyone can complete this form, even if it's not someone who's chronically homeless. So if you wanted to just like, if someone is not chronically homeless, but they're homeless, you could just cross that out and submit it, and DHS should still process it as being certified as being unable to work. Make sure that this bottom section, this is the bottom of the form, gets completed before it's submitted. Um, there's a lot still happening and a lot still getting figured out with regards to the work requirements. This is extremely complicated. A lot of the department has never worked with work requirements before, so the department's been doing a lot of training of staff. Um, and so some staff might not be doing things that are quite in line with what the policies are. So it's something to look out for. Um, we're waiting for more information from DHS for these specific questions, like what are the specific notices that people are receiving going to look like? How often are they going to be notified of where they are with the clock for the time limited SNAP? What will it take to prove compliance? Like, I'm not sure yet. I'm still waiting for DHS to provide more details on this. Um, we don't know much. If you lose SNAP eligibility because of failure to comply, there is an opportunity to get back on if you can show compliance. We're waiting for more details on those kinds of things. Um, so we're gonna get to questions in a second. Just I wanted to tag that like one, I might not know the answers to some things because we just don't know the answers yet. And two, we do have this website. If you want to check it out, it's legalaidchicago.org/ public benefits training materials. With the support of the Supportive Housing Providers Association and the Illinois Office to End and Prevent Homelessness, we do a monthly training series on public benefits. We go through a variety of topics, and we also have a newsletter where I'm now trying to provide, because there's so much changing so fast, I'm trying to make sure that people have the most up-to-date information so that they can help their clients and help themselves, comply with and make sure they're maximizing their benefits. If you go to that website, you can see the slide decks from our former trainings, and you can also sign up for our newsletter if you want. All right.
Gwen, thank you so much. And so yeah, now we're going to go to the question and answer period. I can also try to help answer, but I feel like if you don't know the answer, I probably don't either. But I just want to thank everybody for joining us and to just let you know that we're going to get to as many questions as we can. But there are a lot of questions and some are very specific. And as Gwen mentioned, we might not know the answer to those questions at this point. But we're going to get through as many as I can. And I did try to answer some in the chat or in the Q&A section in writing if I could. Um, so the first question is there a concern with helping with if people get financial assistance that they could then lose aid due to an increase in income?
Yeah, so that's always a concern. And it always depends on like how the financial assistance is structured.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So I don't know who's asking the question, so I don't know how. Um, Governments have set up systems. So like the city of Chicago had a basic income pilot for a while, and they structured that in a way that it would not count as income for any public benefits program, except for I think SSI. But it did not count as income for SNAP. If you're with an organization that is providing assistance, or if you're just like helping out a friend, one thing that you can do to help it not count as income is that instead of giving the person cash, give them goods. So like food or clothes, right? Or whatever. Or you can pay bills for them. And so I know that there are a lot of organizations that they provide housing assistance by paying rent directly to the landlord rather than giving the money to the person to pay to the landlord. It's I don't make the rules. This is like just like how it's set up. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So another question we have is um, what is the anticipated timeline for benefits being released after the government reopens? And if it's over a month, will people be getting
Mhm.
back benefits?
Yeah. So my understanding is that DHS is committed to making it as fast as possible. The way that the money is funded is like I've actually never, this is the first time I've learned about how complicated it is, the process of getting the money from the feds to the people in the state. Um, they're hoping that they can do it within 24 hours, I believe is what they were reporting. Um, my understanding is that people should still get all the SNAP that they're owed. So yes, I believe that they should get all the back. That said, we live in unprecedented times right now, and so I don't want to be too like, yes, that is definitely what will happen. But our expectation is that people will eventually get all of the SNAP benefits they're owed.
And then is there any reason that SNAP recipients should spend down what they currently have on their card? Is there any concern that it'll go away if they have any leftover money from previous months on November 1st?
Great question. So there was a bit of a scare where I would have said that was a concern. So, okay, I'll say no, everything should be fine. They should still have the benefits that are on their cards. They should still be able to spend them. I did just learn through this process that the federal government has the ability to shut down the EBT system in a way that would make it so people cannot spend their benefits. But USDA has committed to not doing that, even though they said, yes, we could, but we're not going to. Um, Again, it's unprecedented times. I don't really, so I'm not really sure how to advise you to proceed at that point, but that's the information that I have.
Thank you. Um, Somebody had a question about proving shelter costs does not refer to emergency shelter costs, but rather housing costs. Is that correct?
So any money that's spent on shelter can count as shelter costs. So if you're going to an emergency shelter that charges fees, that will count, that can count as a shelter cost that can be used for, um, it'll increase the amount of SNAP potentially. It could increase the amount of SNAP that someone receives.
Are there any changes? Are there any changes being made to the McKinney-Vento Act, specifically or indirectly because of the changes to SNAP?
Not that I know of. That's a great question.
Um, if If someone with IDD living in a CILA able to claim a portion of the utilities when the utilities are paid by the provider, but with the person's SSDI. That's very specific.
Wow. Yeah. I don't feel like I can answer that confidently off the top of my head right now. I'm sorry.
No, no problem. What type of verification for shelter would be needed for someone in a transitional housing program that does not have a rental cost or a participation cost per night?
So if they're not paying rent, then they don't get the shelter deduction. Someone has to actually be paying rent to qualify for the deduction. If they are paying rent and there's just no like traditional reporting or receipts that happen, then a letter from the shelter or whoever should qualify. That they said that that could apply to if someone's just like sleeping on someone's couch and paying like $50 a month just to like be there. Um, if they said that a letter is fine, they don't need it doesn't need to be an official lease or anything like that.
Um, is the domestic violence qualifier still applicable for SNAP applications? And if it does, has it changed?
It had no, there's been no changes to domestic violence.
And refugees, just like this person just wants confirmation that refugees can apply for VTTC.
No. So unfortunately, the state it would take well, not right now. It would take a legislative change. Refugees are not one of the classes that are identified in the VTTC legislation, presumably because at the time the VTTC legislation was passed, refugees were eligible for SNAP.
Um, and then a question, somebody had a question if they are working, but their employer cannot give them 20 hours.
Yeah. So that's a great question. I'm gonna scoot back here and see if I can piece together an answer. This is probably this goes into our I'm not sure
Mhm.
how this all is going to work out. Um, I think that the way that the federal rules are written, hold on, where did it go? The way that the federal rules are written, you still need to make up those hours by engaging in some other sort of activity.
But there's other activities that people can do to
Right. So you
qualify.
could volunteer, and these are like
Mhm.
any, it doesn't have to be Illinois, the Department of Human Services has committed to make continuing having SNAP employment and training as a voluntary program. And so there's a lot of flexibility in what kinds of activities can count towards this 20 hours a week.
And that's a question that we had before that I actually want to raise, is that I know that a lot of homeless service providers provide employment training programs and employment support to participants, but they're not like an official like SNAP employment and training program. Um, I guess like what is that type of program? How do you qualify for it?
Yeah. So that's another thing where we're waiting. I know that there's some interest in the state on making this as flexible as possible. I don't know where that's landed right now, and I'm actually going to write a note because I haven't talked to the people who were working on that for a few weeks. And so we've had a lot of movement since then. So I'll check back in with them and then I'll let you know, Beth.
Okay, thank you. Um, do any veterans benefits count for verifying disability? Um, for example, like non-service connected pension or service connected pension benefits or 100% disability or
Yeah.
unemployed. So basically veterans benefits.
For the work restrictions, yeah, I think yeah,
Okay.
you would be unfit for work. I don't, so the Department of Human Services is not connected to the veteran system the way that it is connected to the Social Security system. So I would say if you're a veteran and you're getting some sort of disability benefits that prevent you from working, submit that exemption form, like click that you're unfit for work and submit it just to be on the safe side.
And there was a question about whether or not if you receive SSI or SSDI benefits, do you need to submit this form?
You shouldn't, no.
Oh,
Now, if you feel like just like, let me cover all my bases, I don't think it's going to do any harm.
oh. Um, Regarding the certification period, will the 12-month redetermination period include disabled veterans who are connected or have a VA pension?
So there's two, sorry, I like being able to look at something. Mm-mm-mm. Okay, sorry. So the certification periods are here, and I'm going to look up um, sorry. I saw a training with one of my favorite SNAP advocates this morning who has the ability to like recite all the SNAP rules off the top of his head. And I am unfortunately not one of those people. So let me just look it up real quick.
There are a lot of rules, you're forgiven. And they're changing, it seems like a lot.
They are always changing. And because it's subject to federal and state laws, it's
Mhm.
always changing. Um, because I believe this aligns with the QM. Oh, here it is. So to qualify for the 24-month certification period, um, you have to be a qualifying member. So that includes, I'm just going to go through the veterans ones. A veteran with a service or non-service connected disability that's rated or paid as totally disabled by the Veterans Administration. If you're receiving regular aid and attendance, as part of your VA benefits. It also includes surviving spouses who get aid and attendance or who are permanently homebound. For those of you who don't know VA benefits, those are like specific categories of kinds of VA benefits. Um, Children who are permanently incapacitated, children of veterans, surviving spouses and children of veterans who are entitled to service-connected death or VA pension benefits for non-service connected death. Those are the articulated reasons for veterans.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to parse through all these questions. Let me see here. Um, um, and some of them we've already answered. So, who are considered service providers? I think probably in the space of homelessness, like verifying.
Yeah, I mean, I presume it has to be, that actually hasn't come up in any of the discussions. I presume it has to be an organization. It does not require one to be listed here. Um,
Is there a process for verifying physical, mental, and or medical conditions, or is this self-reported?
Itself for the purposes of the SNAP work requirements, it's just self-reported. So the process will be you submit this form, and you're presumably clicking on this, checking off the physical or mental condition section. Um, DHS policy is that they should accept your statement unless there's some reason to question it. The example that they gave us was, let's say that you go apply in person in an office and you say, I can't work because my arm is broken, but your arm is not broken. Like it, that's what we're being told is that it has to be something quite obvious or like quite, it's not just like, oh, we sort of have a question for you. It should be something that really like raises a flag that what the person is saying is not true.
And um, do people have to resubmit or reprove their exemptions at every redetermination?
Yeah.
Um, and um, so sorry, I'm just kind of
Yeah.
and then we've gone over like the T visa and U visa or U visa and VAWA immigration like visa holders will be affected.
Yes. So sorry. I usually do these in Teams and like I'm not used to these other controls. I keep like flying by. Okay, so yeah, it's VAWA, asylees, refugees, and T visa holders. The ones who have hope of possibly qualifying for state food assistance under current law are the asylees and the T visa holders. Refugees don't qualify for any of the state assistance programs that are like specifically for these like there's like some assistance programs that are for immigrants in general, like emergency medical coverage, and children's health care, and moms and babies. Sorry, just like don't forget these. Um, but they don't qualify for any sort of cash or food assistance. Asylees and T visa holders can now potentially qualify for state food. They will continue qualifying for federal cash TANF. VAWA is a weird one. VAWA, we're losing food eligibility, but they can qualify for state medical and state TANF.
Thank you. Some people have questions about and I know WIC is being affected, but folks had questions about the school lunch program.
My understanding is that the school lunch program is not being impacted. I don't focus on that part of the law, but like I was listening to and I'm training this morning, they had folks talking about programs generally. It did not sound like it would be affected.
I had a couple questions about folks that are so one of the questions was folks that are undocumented, but their children are citizens and receiving benefits, how they will be impacted. And then just in general, like if somebody has a 17-year-old child and they are not working and don't meet an exemption, is there a way that the child can get benefits?
Yeah, so if you have a mixed status family, um, only okay, so which part are we talking about? Work for the work requirements?
I think the first one is, yeah, I think, well, yes, I think it's for the work requirements.
Okay. So
And so
anyone
they're
who
both like, it would be like just in general, if a parent wasn't being like didn't qualify for SNAP because they didn't meet a work requirement, um, and maybe that's due to them being mixed status, but then just in general, if they're not meeting it, can a minor child still qualify?
yeah, so all yes to all this. So if any so the work requirement is specific to the individual. So if you have a household of four and one of them loses eligibility because of the work requirement, then you're going to go down to a household of three, and DHS is going to have to recalculate the SNAP benefits for the household. Um, Okay, well, I'm just going to go and I'm sorry, debating on whether to get into the weeds a little bit, and I'm going to err because it sounds like there's some people who are pretty savvy on here. Um, if you have a family of four and it's a parent of children, sorry, these are my images of like parents and children, and the parent is working but isn't like meeting the work requirements, but they still have some sort of income. That income is still going to be counted against the children in the SNAP case after they get kicked out. It's going to be prorated, but it will still impact how much SNAP the family receives. And so it can get kind of complicated. DHS is used to doing this precisely because of the mixed status families. So in a mixed status family, if you meet the immigration requirements, the children can still, or it's usually the children, the U.S. citizens in the household or whoever's meeting the immigration requirements, they can receive SNAP benefits even if there are members who are ineligible. Um, and there's just like special rules for how the income is counted for those households. Um, if if you do have a mixed household family, so someone's not eligible for SNAP because of their immigration status, then they are not required to comply with the SNAP work requirements. The work requirements only apply to people who are in the SNAP household.
Um, Thank you. I think we'll go for a few more minutes if Gwen, if you have a few more minutes.
Yeah, I can do a couple more minutes.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I'm just gonna go through we've done a lot of the questions. I think we have, let me see here. Um, are there, is there any news or expectation that once the program is resumed, that recipients will receive a lower amount, or that the benefit amount per month will be lowered?
No, they haven't said anything about that. I don't expect that they can do that. They'd have to issue new notices for everyone.
Okay. And then WIC, I guess some providers are saying that there is no changes to the WIC program anticipated. And I think I had heard differently, but I'm not sure.
It keeps changing, so that's all possible.
Okay.
And I can't remember, there was an update on it this morning. I think they said that they found the money. Oh, school lunch. Sorry, I just want to tag in talking about the school lunches. There's talk about those who are arguing that the federal government has the duty to continue funding SNAP, um, have been mentioning things about taking money out of the school lunch program, to offset the SNAP. And with that, but the idea of that is that sorry, and I apologize. I'm going to caveat this with I am saying things that I am hearing about in the news. This is not me speaking as an expert. This is like me being on the level of you all in terms of not you all, but like I'm not in the weeds of this like policy negotiation. I'm not allowed to be. Um but my understanding from what they were saying was that you could reallocate money from other services, one of which could be the school lunch program, but with the idea that that actually wouldn't hurt the school lunch program in the long term because it would all get refunded in the end or something like that. Oh God, I shouldn't have even gone down this path. I apologize. I don't remember where WIC was. There have been fears on and off for a while that WIC was going to run out of funding. I think they said that we could keep going. I don't see anything up to date. I can check in on that to see where that is.
And you can file for an exemption if you've been approved for Social Security benefits, but just have not received the payments yet.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you should qualify.
Yeah. And then if you are behind on child support, are you eligible for SNAP?
Um,
If you owe child support.
yes.
Um, and how would somebody that is in the process of applying for disability prove that they are in the process of applying for disability?
So you should just be able to click the unfit for work and submit it, and then DHS should
Mhm.
not be asking for verifications unless they have some valid reason to think that there's discrepancies in your application. So that's one way. You could also ask your attorney to submit a letter, um, just saying that they're representing you if you have an attorney, or provide some sort of evidence that, like, you get notices from DDS, the Department of
Mhm.
Disability Services, or from Social Security in the process. You could submit those. Um, they also We're trying to work this out with DHS right now. They have an online system, like a data sharing system, where they can see some things about Social Security applications. So they're looking into whether they get enough information to determine if someone has an application pending. And so we're hopeful that they're going to figure that out. And then they'd be able to determine that someone's exempt without them having to actually proactively file anything. But we're still waiting. They're still trying to figure out what their technology allows.
Great. I think we have pretty much exhausted the list of questions. So thank you, Gwen, so much. This was amazing, and we're really grateful for your time and all your information. Just a reminder that we will be sharing the slides and a recording of this training for those that want to. I know I will need to revisit to absorb all the information um, and for those that could not attend. So thank you very much. If you have any questions also, you can feel free to reach out to me. My name is Beth Malik, and my email is beth@chicagohomeless.org. Thank you so much, and everybody have a good night.